This snacking at night has to go. It's called grazing. I was a professional snacker at night. I would basically, after dinner, eat constantly until I went to bed. I was constantly putting things in my mouth. And, nuts, apples, chips, you name it, that was me. So popcorn, oh my gosh. And that's very, very bad. So we want to get rid of the snacking. How do we do it? Well, we use what's called self-discipline. We have to make sure we don't buy any snacks anymore, so they're not available to us. We want to stay busy, because if you're idle and just sitting there, maybe watching TV, it's going to be more difficult. But I really think that what's going to help you is this dinner. Making sure that you have a very big dinner with this fat. So you're actually really full and you don't feel the need for any additional things. But just realize, if you're like me and everyone else, you probably have insulin resistance, which means you can't absorb nutrients as well as you should. So even though you eat and you're full, you might not feel satisfied. There's a difference. Feeling satisfied is going to happen once the insulin resistance goes away, and especially if you're eating a lot of nutrient-dense foods. There are some things you can do that will also improve that one point. Apple cider vinegar, okay? Maybe a tablespoon in your water for dinner. Apple cider vinegar has acetic acid. The biggest benefit of acetic acid is to make insulin more sensitive, to help your blood sugars. So it's going to actually help you reduce insulin. That's why it can help you lose weight, but it'll also help your appetite. It'll help actually insulin work better, so you absorb more nutrients and you'll be less hungry. So apple cider vinegar in your water is really good. I would also, while you're at it, add some lemon to your water, lemon juice, okay? Maybe a teaspoon, maybe a half of a lemon, maybe a whole lemon. This way you can have things like vitamin C if it's fresh, or citric acid that can help reduce kidney stones, and if you're at risk for gout, because sometimes when you're doing fasting, your uric acid goes up, which acts as an antioxidant, but it can flare up gout. So just add the lemon and apple cider vinegar in your water when you drink this for dinner. Another suggestion are these things called vegetables, okay? I highly recommend you consume more vegetables. So I'm talking about like a big salad. I will do my big salad either in the first meal or the second meal. Now my meal is actually about right here, so I might eat at 3 and then at 6, so I have a very, very short eating window. It's hard for me to eat all the calories in one meal, so I spread it out within like maybe 3, maybe 4 hours. But that's just me. I just want to focus right now on not necessarily going beyond this 18 and 6, but let's say you're eating at 12 and 6. To make it easy, you can add a salad right here, and a salad right here, or you can just have a very big salad. The salad that you eat should be eaten in the beginning of the meal. Why? Because if you eat the protein first, I have found that the chances of you eating that salad are going to be slim to none because you're now filled up with the protein. So I always recommend eat the salad first and then eat your protein and fat second. It seems to work, but again, that's just a minor point. Now, why do we need the salad? Well, it's going to give you more potassium and magnesium, which is going to help that insulin problem I talked about. Also, it's going to give you energy. Also, it's going to prevent cramping in your legs, and it's going to prevent keto fatigue, etc., etc. The fiber of the vegetables feeds the microbes, and that's what the microbes live on. So you're feeding your microbes, they get to eat something, and then what they do is they change it into a type of fat, which actually is really good for your blood sugars. So I found that if I don't consume large salads, that I don't feel quite right. In fact, it's harder to get into keto, and it's not going to go as smooth. Also, the vegetables are really good for your liver, and you're just going to feel cleaner if you do that. And you can switch it out. You can have just vegetables, okay, sometime, or just a salad other time. If you do the vegetables, you don't need the quantity. You don't need 10 cups of like broccoli, right? So you do small, or maybe half the amount. And then for salad, because it's not as dense, you can have more of that. The salads, apple vinegar, eating more fat at the end of the meal is going to help you avoid this snacking. Now, I want to just mention something about cholesterol because this question keeps coming up over and over and over and over again. What happens if my cholesterol goes up? It happens with a percentage of the population. Usually it goes down, but in some people it goes up, like my wife. And people are concerned. They go to the doctor and like, oh my gosh, my cholesterol's high because I'm eating all this fat. Well, if you really understand what's happening, it's not going to be that scary because when you burn fat, a certain portion of that fat is cholesterol. So it's composed of triglycerides, which you use for energy, but also cholesterol, which you don't use for energy. You don't burn cholesterol. So the cholesterol in the fat has to come out, has to go somewhere, right? I mean, the whole goal is to burn your fat reserve. So we have to get the cholesterol out somehow. So it has to go through this thing called the liver, okay? It comes to the liver. And if you don't have enough liver function, or you don't have enough bile for some reason, let's say you don't have a gallbladder, or let's say you have a fatty liver and you're not producing enough bile, then you may have a little backup of cholesterol. So the more bile you have, the easier it is for your body to get rid of this excess cholesterol. But even the fact that your cholesterol is high and you don't have the bile to break it down or get rid of it as fast as you would like, realize if you went to do an advanced lipid profile test and you found that you have high LDL, there's a couple different types of LDL, and you're going to find that the high LDL that you have is the large particle size. It's not the small, dense type of LDL. So the small, dense type is the dangerous one. You're not going to find that. You're only going to find that if you're doing high carbs, okay? So I wouldn't worry about it, but if you are concerned, you can do the test and you can see for yourself. And I included a video of my own wife having high LDL, and I explained that thoroughly. Now, the other thing that I want to mention, which is the icing on the cake, or well, I probably shouldn't talk about cake, but when you do intermittent fasting and keto together, within 14 days, 50% of the fat in your liver is going to be gone. That is huge. That is exciting. As long as you don't eat that icing on the cake, of course. All right, a couple other things I want to show you about this fasting thing. Green tea, very, very, very awesome to drink through the day because green tea helps insulin resistance. Okay, it'll allow you to fast longer. Now, there's other types of tea or herbs that are in tea that are also really good for blood sugars that will help reduce appetite, like green tea will, like cinnamon tea, using the herb garcinia, ginseng, ginger, are all really good to lower your appetite. So that's just an extra little tip. If you exercise, okay, I'm going to recommend you not do any type of pre-workout drink with a carbohydrate or even protein. I wouldn't recommend any post-drink or taking any amino acids while you're working out, before or after. Why? Because here you are, you just worked out, and you created this amazing effect with growth hormone, and as soon as you start eating something, you basically kind of nullify a lot of those results, especially if it's carbohydrate, and even if it's protein, okay? You're doing some protein powder. So realize, as far as the nutrients around that exercise, especially amino acids, you're going to get enough amino acids from the meals, okay? So you don't have to worry about putting back these amino acids, because really most of them tend to even just turn to sugar, like the branch amino acids. So I wouldn't recommend eating around that exercise. Keep your fasting consistent, okay? The other point I want to bring up is supplements. When people fast, a lot of times they have symptoms like keto fatigue, keto flu, they might get cramps, they might have thyroid symptoms. All that means is that you're probably deficient in certain nutrients because the demand for certain nutrients go higher, and maybe you haven't been eating nutrient-dense foods for a while. So what you need to do is just make sure you just take B vitamins, natural ones. I recommend nutritional yeast and electrolytes. And I would recommend an electrolyte powder that also has trace minerals. I'll put a link down below of the one that I recommend. That way you can get the trace minerals and the electrolyte minerals with high amounts of potassium, which is going to help you. Potassium is needed in large amounts in the body. I'm talking like 4,700 milligrams. So sometimes if you can't do a lot of salad, this is a good, well, backup plan. But if you do the supplements, okay, with intermittent fasting and especially prolonged fasting, you can easily avoid keto fatigue, keto flu, thyroid symptoms. All right, so now let me just cover a couple mistakes that people make. A small snack. Let's say you're doing keto and you're on a roll. I'm just going to fast all day long. So instead of doing the fasting and waiting to your big meal, I'm just going to do maybe a little snack just to kind of push me through, thinking that doing a little snack or lower calories is going to get me by and I'll be fine with that. But realize that these snacks, especially the protein ones, like if you did like a scoop of peanut butter, for example, what's going to happen is you're going to spike insulin. It's a protein. Protein triggers insulin. Not as much as carbs, but it will. And then guess what? About an hour and a half, you're going to be hungry. It's going to throw you off your plan. So there's really only two things that won't stimulate insulin: fiber and fat. Protein will. So if you have to snack on something, do either pure fat, as in like MCT oil, okay, or that bulletproof coffee, or fiber, something very fibrous, like celery, for example, without the peanut butter, or some greens, okay? Now, some of you are going like, I'm not going to do that because that's not very pleasurable, but I'm just telling you that a mistake that people make is doing this little protein snack. As I interview people and find out, because that's not very fiber, something very fibrous, like celery, for example, without the peanut butter, or some greens, okay? Now, celery, for example, without the peanut butter, something very fibrous, like celery, for example, without the peanut butter, or some greens, okay? Now, some of you are going like, I'm not going to do that because that's not very pleasurable, but I'm just telling you that a mistake that people make is doing this little protein snack. As I interview people and find out why it's not working, I find out they're, well, I'm sort of doing keto with a couple little snacks through the day and that type of thing. So just realize that that's why your results are not going to be where you need to be. And I'm just bringing this up as a as a point, these small snacks are a killer, okay? Even if they're healthy. Okay, the next little thing that I want to bring up is that the awareness of a little bit of carb and what that does to the state of ketosis. If you're trying to lose weight, if you're trying to get into a really good fasting state, and you're going along, and let's say at night you do, I'm just going to do a little wine. It's not many calories, whatever. Or let's say during the day you're going to do just like one piece of bread. What you have to realize is that a little bit of carb can block you as far as knocking you out of ketosis for a good amount of time. Half a glass of wine could knock you out of ketosis for 24 hours. A couple drinks on the weekend, that whole weekend you're not going to be burning any fat, or you're not going to be in ketosis. Just realize that. I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm just the messenger giving you the information that if you do it, don't be surprised if the results are not what you want them to be, okay? Because sometimes people are just thinking of calories. They're not looking at the hormone effects of different types of food. All right, the next point I want to bring up is this, this idea that it's all going to happen really quick. Maybe you have a friend or a family member that does this and it happens really quick for them, but for you, it's not happening. I had a guy that did my program many years ago. I didn't really educate him that well. And he says, yeah, your program didn't work. I says, what do you mean? Yeah, I did it for 2 weeks and it didn't work. I says, what happened? Well, it did work for 2 weeks, but then I stopped doing it, but then it didn't keep working. I'm like, what? I said, this is not a short-term thing where it's just going to fix your weight problem. Now you can go back to your old plan. This is like a lifelong change, a new lifestyle process or habit that you need to do consistently for the rest of your life, okay? And that was something that I just need to educate them on. Because at this point, the number of years that an average person has eaten poorly, and including myself in this group, has been a long time, okay? We've developed this condition called insulin resistance. It's become very, very chronic, okay? It's a bad problem. And the time it takes to fix it is much greater than what you may think. The level of effort is going to be a lot more than what you think. So you want to give it time. You don't want to focus on just the weight. You want to focus on the appetite, energy, cognitive improvements, decreased inflammation. That means it's working because you're creating your health. So this is why you have to have patience. This is why we call you a patient. And this is why we have also a waiting room. Last point I'm going to bring up. This false piece of information that we've been told so many times. Everything in moderation. Just a little bit is fine. There's no bad food. Just keep everything in balance. It's all about balance. No, that is not true. When you're trying to get healthy, you don't want to balance everything. There's things that are really important and there's things that are trivial, not very important at all. What I'm showing you here is the most important thing you can do for your health out of anything, and that is fasting. And I'm also showing you the food that you need to avoid the most, which is a carbohydrate, and the other foods that you can eat in higher amounts, like fat. And there is one food that you want to eat in moderation, and that's protein, right? So to get someone healthy, they're already in an out of balance state, okay? So to put more balance and just balance everything out and eat a little bit of everything is the worst advice that anyone can give you. So I've just given you the things that you should focus the most of your attention on when getting healthy. And now your next step is to learn on what to eat. And that's in this video right here. Check it out.
И Самсонов, вести из Нью-Йорка. До Женевы, Брюсселя и Вены
далеко, но и укутанная снегом подмосковная усадьба Архангельская тоже на время стало местом, где делается большая мировая политика. Обсуждать будущее Украины сюда приехали советники германского канцлера и французского президента. Но сначала знакомство с русскими обычаями. Перед серьезным разговором надо чаю из самовара испить.
С Новым годом!
Давайте.
Да в санях, запряженных орловскими рысаками, с ветерком прокатиться. Важная встреча проходит накануне православного Рождества, и катание на санях — старинная святочная традиция. Тем более, что вокруг есть на что полюбоваться. Усадьбу Архангельская не зря часто называют подмосковным Версалем. Вокруг парки и дворцы невероятной красоты.
Эх, залетные! Вот такой скоростью, 15-20 километров. Мы шли, им понравилось.
Представить, что такая русская зима могла бы понравиться советнику из Киева, невозможно. Поэтому от стран нормандского формата только 3 представителя. Дмитрий Казак коллегам из Парижа и Берлина донес четкую позицию Москвы. Альтернативы Минским соглашениям не существует.
Все, и новое правительство Германии, и прежнее руководство Франции подтвердили свою приверженность к Минским соглашениям как безальтернативной основе для урегулирования конфликта на юго-востоке Украины. Договорились о планах по дальнейших контактах, в том числе с участием уже украинского руководства.
И даже при таких результатах переговоры шли дольше 4 часов и закончились уже в ночи. А затем местом, где сидел представитель Германии, осталась целая стопка разорванных документов. К многочасовым и трудным переговорам Западу надо бы привыкать. Россия от своих красных линий отступать не намерена. Тем более, что перед переговорами с США обозначены они максимально четко. И даже, что редкость в дипломатии, сразу изложены на бумаге и опубликованы. Это всего несколько страниц. На них преамбула и 8 статей. В них конкретные предложения российской стороны.
Соединенные Штаты Америки принимают обязательство исключить дальнейшее расширение организации Североатлантического договора в восточном направлении, отказаться от приема в альянс государств, ранее входивших в Союз Советских Социалистических Республик. Соединенные Штаты Америки не будут создавать военные базы на территории государств, ранее входивших в Союз Советских Социалистических Республик.
Вот оно, главное условие безопасности Российской Федерации. Обязательство не расширять НАТО на восток должно быть зафиксировано на бумаге. Москва словам больше не верит.
Нам важен не ход переговоров, нам важен результат. Ну разве мы не знаем? Я же много раз уже об этом сказал. И вы наверняка знаете хорошо. Ни одного дюйма на восток, сказали нам в 90-е годы. Ну и чего? Надули. Просто нагло обманули. 5 волн расширения НАТО. И теперь уже, пожалуйста, в Румынии, сейчас в Польше появляются соответствующие системы. Вот о чем речь. Ну поймите же вы в конце концов. Не мы кому-то угрожаем. К нам пришли. И теперь еще говорят, нет, теперь и Украина будет. Значит, и там будут системы. Или, бог с ним, не в НАТО, а на двусторонней основе будут. Базы и ударные системы вооружений. Ну вот о чем идет речь. А вы требуете от меня каких-то гарантий. Вы должны дать гарантии. Вы. И немедленно. Сейчас.
Другие предложения российской стороны касаются размещения вооружений.
Стороны воздерживаются от размещения своих вооруженных сил и вооружений, в том числе в рамках международных организаций, военных союзов или коалиций, в районах, где такое развертывание воспринималось бы другой стороной как угроза своей национальной безопасности, за исключением такого развертывания в пределах национальных территорий сторон.
Это явный упрек в сторону НАТО, чьи войска под предлогом защиты от фантомной российской угрозы за последние годы только нарастили свое присутствие в Польше и Прибалтике. Россия предлагает и новое решение в условиях, когда Соединенные Штаты последовательно разрушили почти все договоры, ограничивающие гонку вооружений.
Стороны обязуются не развертывать ракеты средней и меньшей дальности наземного базирования вне национальной территории, а также в тех районах своей национальной территории, из которых такие вооружения способны поражать цели на национальной территории другой страны.
По высказываниям из-за океана какие-то российские предложения, например, снижение активности военных учений и неразмещение ракет на Украине, Вашингтон готов обсуждать, а какие-то предложения резко отвергаются еще до начала переговоров. Среди них снижение численности войск НАТО на границе с Россией. Российских дипломатов возглавит заместитель министра иностранных дел Сергей Рябков. У нашей делегации мандат с четко определенными и жесткими условиями. Москва не будет обсуждать требования США относительно перемещения войск на собственной территории. НАТО больше не удастся оттеснять Россию на второй роли. Альянсу пора возвращаться на рубежи 97-го года. Все это Сергей Рябков заявил, уже приехав в Женеву.
Мы не с протянутой рукой туда едем. Мы едем с четко сформулированной задачей, которую необходимо решить на тех условиях, которые мы сформулировали. Если мы будем ходить по кругу и повторять одно и то же, если не увидим ни малейших признаков готовности с той стороны...
Диско, диско.
In this video, I want to talk about what I would eat if I was diagnosed with COVID-19 coronavirus. Well, the first thing to know about that is that the pre-existing conditions greatly increase your risk of not just in the susceptibility to getting the virus, but in the complications and even the death rate. And I'm talking about diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, and obesity. These are the big ones. There's other ones too, but all of these have a common denominator, high insulin. And I'm talking about diabetes type 2 right here. And there's a very simple way to deal with this. What you do is you go on a low-carb diet, okay, and we're talking the ketogenic diet, moderate protein, high fat. High fats in the diet are totally fine to do as long as you keep your carbohydrates low. And of course, I always recommend the healthy version of the ketogenic diet. I put a link down below if you want to know what that is and how to do it. Getting on the diet will greatly help support healthy insulin levels. Now, the other things I would do, I would start to consume food high in zinc. And I just want to say that anything I say in this video is not meant to diagnose or replace your medical care or provide a treatment for the coronavirus. Check with your doctor before taking any of this advice. There's a huge association between having enough zinc in your body and having your immune system work properly. Almost at every single level of your immune defenses, zinc is involved. And if you wanted to know what foods are highest in zinc, oysters are the #1 food. Other shellfish would be another option, red meat, cheese. There's other foods, but these have probably the most zinc. Zinc is very, very important in supporting a healthy thymus gland. And the thymus is a training camp for certain immune cells. So it's very, very important. And if you're deficient in zinc, your thymus actually shrinks. The next thing I would do is make sure I have enough vitamin D. You can get that in cod liver oil, salmon, fatty fish, but it's very, very difficult to consume foods and get the amount of vitamin D that you need. So I would highly recommend...
С ума сойдешь, блин, с этими. Просто может жить как-то. Просто как-то, да.
Getting enough sun. 20 minutes every single day would give you enough vitamin D, because vitamin D is what's called an immune modulator. So it keeps the immune system from overreacting, where you have so much inflammation and collateral damage, it could damage your lungs and other tissues. So much time, 20 minutes every single day would give you enough vitamin D, because vitamin D is what's called an immune modulator. So it keeps the immune system from overreacting, where you have so much inflammation and collateral damage, it could damage your lungs and other tissues. So vitamin D is very, very important in keeping the immune system at a balanced level. Certain viruses have a strategy of blocking the receptor for vitamin D. Taking enough vitamin D can actually override that, so you can keep that immune support at a high level. And then you have vitamin C, very important in supporting a healthy immune system, especially dealing with viruses. Leafy greens will give you a lot of vitamin C. Sauerkraut, if you actually make your own sauerkraut or get a high quality sauerkraut from either a farmer's market or the health food store, you can get a tremendous amount of vitamin C, sometimes 700 milligrams. And really, all you need is between 70 and 90 milligrams as the RDA. Now, of course, that doesn't account for all types of sauerkraut, because there's different versions, but I'm just talking at the high end. We're starting at 700, and it's probably going to go down from there. Berries are a good source of vitamin C as well. There's a lot of other foods that have vitamin C, but the more you cook foods or you can foods, you lose not just vitamin C, vitamin D, but zinc too. Canned foods will deplete the effectiveness of zinc by 85%. And by the way, if you think that you're going to consume like orange juice for your vitamin C, you're mistaken, because they pasteurize or use high temperatures and cook the orange juice that destroys the vitamin C. The vitamin C that you would have in that orange juice is usually coming from an added synthetic version of vitamin C called ascorbic acid. And it's my opinion that is definitely not the same as the vitamin C that comes from actual fruits and vegetables. And lastly, let's talk about this thing called stress. I know it might be hard to believe, but some people are actually stressed out nowadays. Now, stress increases cortisol. Cortisol, chronically elevated, as in long-term stress, can severely affect your immune system. It causes your lymphatic system to shrink. It makes your lymph nodes decrease. It decreases the antibody production, so you lose your ability to fight infection. It also greatly increases your susceptibility to getting viruses and bacteria. I would actively and aggressively do what I can to keep stress at a minimum, and that would definitely include not watching the news so much, because there's so many messages that are all about doom and gloom, bad news over and over and over, fear, fear, fear. Guess what that does to the immune system? It really makes the person way more susceptible to getting the infection as compared to not being in that state of worry and anxiety. If you actually trace it back to right before they got that infection, I would say nearly 100% of the time they had a stress event. Stress is a huge trigger to not only being susceptible to viruses, but activating viruses that are already inside your body. This explains why people, when they get stressed, they have shingles, they get herpes, they get all sorts of other health problems. We have getting on the right diet to minimize these conditions right here, eating foods high in the 3 most important nutrients, and lowering stress. And lastly, if you haven't seen my videos on the nutrients or these conditions here, I put the videos up right here. Check them out.
For me especially, Grammarly is very, very helpful when writing business emails because, as you know, English is not my first language. When you upgrade to Grammarly Premium, it gives you access to advanced features that actually allow me to write my business emails and my video scripts more efficiently. The premium version provides you alternative vocabulary suggestions for overused words to save you time when finding synonyms, as well as providing clarity suggestions to improve your concise.
Hey, Dr. Berg here. I'm going to talk about insulin resistance. I'm going to make it really, really simple, so just track with me. Here's what happens. Your pancreas, which is located on the left lower quadrant right by your rib cage, makes a hormone called insulin, and insulin responds to sugar. In other words, it's triggered by sugar or anything that turns into sugar. So anything sweet, anything that, like even refined grains, can trigger insulin, and it kicks in there, and it goes into your cells, and then what it does is it removes the sugar from your blood. Okay, so that's the purpose, is to lower the sugar. All right. Normally in our blood, we need about 100 milligrams per deciliter, and basically what that means is you just focus on the 100. So when you get your sugar test in your blood, it should be like a 100. The goal is to make it 100. Anything higher is bad, anything lower is bad. We need it 100. When it's at 100, you're at your mental best. You're feeling the best, but when it goes high, you get what's called diabetes. So diabetes is a high sugar situation. When the blood sugars go low, that's hypo sugar or hypoglycemia. Okay, that's kind of a pre-diabetes state. So when I was 12, I had hypoglycemia. I remember skipping a meal and feeling really dizzy and irritable and cranky, playing outside, and I don't know what it was. But of course, I was living on pure sugar. I would raid the cupboards and eat pure sugar all the time. So that's really what causes hypoglycemia, is because what happens is you eat all this sugar and we get this hyper-reactive high insulin state, which is gonna like take a sledgehammer and push that sugar right down. So we're gonna have low sugar, irritable, cranky, craving, dizzy, all those things. Okay, so now what happens over a period of time when you're hypoglycemic over a period of time, your body doesn't like that. So it's going to say stop. So it's going to try to protect itself, and it's going to turn off the receptor, the thing that receives. So it's going to ignore that insulin response. So it's not going to receive it anymore. Someone's talking, but no one's listening, and that's called a downgrade or a blocked receptor. So it doesn't receive as much as it did before. And that's what insulin resistance is, because it's your body, your cells are resistant. It's inhibiting this absorption because it's saying, dude, why do you keep eating sugar? Would you please stop? And what happens when this happens is it forces insulin to go higher because it's compensating. It's on a feedback loop here. So insulin resistance forces your body to make more insulin to create the same effect. Because without this insulin, the sugar stays high. And your body does not like that. So it has to lower it somehow. So it's just going to wear the pancreas out. All right? So diabetes is really a situation where you have high sugar and it won't come down to 100. All right? We already passed the hypoglycemia thing. We're doing type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance, and because of you've been eating too much sugar. And when this becomes like that, your body protects you, and several things happen as a consequence, in addition to jacking up more insulin. Number two, you're going to be hungry. Why? Because insulin has a few other purposes. It not only lowers the sugar in your blood, but it also helps you absorb the nutrition in your cells. So the nutrients, fatty acids, proteins, vitamins. So without insulin, you can't get this nutrition in your cells. So guess what? You're gonna be hungry all the time. You're not going to be satisfied. You eat, but it doesn't really go in. So you have this fat person that's starving to death. You can't get healthy like that. And then all of a sudden you're going to crave carbs like crazy. And just so you know, if you're craving carbs or sweets, it is literally impossible to burn fat. So every time that you're craving, you're not burning any fat. Don't worry, I'll show you how to fix that. So we got cravings, hunger, and decreased nutrition, And that's why over a period of time, diabetics end up with all sorts of health problems. They go blind, they get their feet start getting destructive nerves, so it's called peripheral neuropathy. They get tingling in the feet and the hands, and they just kind of go downhill. And then also, this condition is going to prevent the storage of sugar. It's called glycogen, which basically is a stored sugar in your liver and your muscles. So we need that to live off of when we're sleeping, between meals. And so if we can't store the sugar as much anymore, what happens is we end up having all sorts of problems of storing more fat. If we're not storing sugar, we have to store more fat. So you're going to keep getting fatter and fatter and fatter. And also, in between the meals, because you can't have a storage of sugar, you're going to have too many highs and too many lows. So it's going to come up and down too much. It's the storage of that sugar that maintains a nice level sugar. So, and especially noted when you get up in the morning after not eating for 8 hours. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to cover. Let's go back to this sugar. We need 100 milligrams per deciliter. That would equal about 5 grams of sugar. That's like a heaping teaspoon of sugar in your entire body. On an average person, they only need a teaspoon of sugar, but not consuming sugar, but from the food that converts to the sugar. Even protein and fat can convert to sugar. So we need about 1 teaspoon of sugar. We don't need more than that. But check this out. An 8-ounce typical can of soda, an 8-ounce typical glass of orange juice is about 39 teaspoons of sugar. Okay, so now we went from 5 to 39. That's a tremendous stress on the pancreas. Oh my gosh, what you're doing is you're just wearing the thing out. It's creating whiplash of your pancreas. And because the pancreas has 2 parts, one is a hormone part and the other is an enzyme part called the exocrine gland, you're going to start having all sorts of digestive problems, including possible pancreatitis, inflammation of the pancreas, tension in your upper digestive system, bloating for sure, maybe even pain that goes around your back, undigested proteins, you can't digest protein anymore, all sorts of bowel problems. I mean, you name it, it creates a lot of problems. Now, so the body is trying to protect itself from too much insulin, so it's going to block the resistance, the receptor, create more resistance in there, and then the sugar is going to go high. So apparently the body is going to protect the cell and not necessarily the blood, so that's why the blood starts filling up with sugar, and that's where you get all this extra fat and triglycerides and cholesterol. In other words, triglycerides are blood fats, and because the cell can't absorb nutrition anymore, or protein or fat, it's going to dump around the rest of the body as in the blood as blood fats, adipose tissue, and cholesterol. Those are the effects of this situation. So we got this hypoglycemia thing, right, which is high sugar, and then the receptor becomes resistant, so it doesn't absorb it anymore. That's type 2 diabetes. That creates all sorts of problems. And then down the road, you end up with diabetes type 1. And in type 1, the pancreas is already asleep. Okay, it can't produce this anymore. So now you have to be injected because the sugars are going higher and higher and higher and higher, and your insulin can't keep up to lower them. And yes, there are other causes of diabetes type 1, autoimmune, but the question is what causes autoimmune? That's in another video. The point is that type 1 diabetes is the worst situation because now you've completely ran out of this whole situation, and now you have to be injected or take insulin. So what do we do about this? What can be done? Well, there's a couple things you can do. And number one, we need to lower insulin. Okay, we need to lower insulin. That has to be a primary goal. Doctors do not emphasize this enough. What they do is they give you insulin. They don't put enough attention on the diet. They don't realize that in a diabetic situation, in a hypoglycemic situation, if the person's craving, they should not be consuming any sugars. 0. don't give the person recommendations like everything in moderation. That would be very bad. Zero sugars. They can do substitute sugars like xylitol, stevia, but they can't afford to continue to eat more sugar or juice. So, number one, we avoid things that trigger insulin.
Охренеть просто охренеть. Никому не нужно вообще представить. Да. Не знаю, я такой, я самый умный на свете человек. Да, понимаешь, ты меня понимаешь. То есть если там же, да, понимаешь. Ну вот смотрите. Смеешься, ну, нет, наоборот. Вот он,